anything. It's just maybe a little bit of a funny story. A couple of weeks ago, my boy was playing. My brother was in town for about a week, and all the cousins were together. They're rarely all together in one room. Of course, now when I say they're all together in one room, I mean they're all together in one room that I'm not in. You know, we tell them to go to the den, and we don't. You know, they don't get to associate with the adults a lot. Yeah, but they were in there playing. He got his fingers bent back, and I never really found out how or why. It doesn't matter. It's just what happens when kids play. My kids play anyway. He got his fingers bent back, and one of them, we thought it was broke. So, and you know, I mean, it wasn't blue, and it wasn't swollen real big, and there was no bone sticking out, you know. So I said, well, my thinking is, usually if a kid's just putting on, he'll forget about it. He'll just kind of go on and forget about it. Well, all through the night and all through part of the next day, he was complaining about it. I called up Renita. I said, well, I guess we need to take him to the doctor and see what they say about it, you know. But he had, you know those little ice packs that you put in the freezer that you put on your foot or your hand or whatever? Well, he slept with that thing on his hand. Well, obviously through the night it melted. And he said, Daddy, he said, I need something cold in my hand to keep the swelling down. I said, oh yeah? He said, yeah. He said, I just want to hold an ice cream sandwich. I said, is that right? He said, yeah. He said, I want to hold it. He said, and he said, now Daddy, if I hold it, it's going to melt, so I'm going to have to eat it. I said, well, son, I said, you go on ahead and have yourself because they don't get, you know, they don't get stuff like that a whole lot. Usually that's reserved for me. No, I'm kidding. I said, you go ahead and eat yourself an ice cream sandwich. But come to find out, thank the Lord, it was not broken, it was sprained. It was sprained. But I meant to share that with y'all last week, and I told my mom about that on the phone. She said, son, and Brother Owen says this a lot, and I don't know if they mean it as a compliment, but everybody always says, well, he acts just like you. And I'm not sure that it's meant in a complimentary way. Open your Bibles to Matthew 19. Now after Matthew 19, you have a couple of, and things start kind of escalating. You got the Olivet Discourse in 24, and you got different things going on. You got the Passover, and you got the, obviously it ends with the crucifixion, the corrupt trial, the crucifixion, the resurrection, the ascension. But after chapter 19, things begin to kind of escalate. Brother Owen read a verse last week in chapter 22. They asked him a question, and he burned them again. And it said at the last, I believe it's the last verse in that chapter, said they asked him no more questions at all. So they began, they kind of escalated the situation. They went from trying to trip him up philosophically. They were always trying to trip him up, use his words to trip him up philosophically, to make him say something contrary to Moses' law. And of course, they never succeeded. He did not come to destroy the law. He came to fulfill the law. So when they decided, all right, we're going to amp it up a little bit. Then they went as a whole group. They went as the entire political, religious body. They began to band together to actively try to kill him. So after 19, things kind of escalate. So once we get through, we're going to do a little bit of review for last week. There's some comments that I didn't get to make. We're going to do a little bit of review from last week. And once we do that, before we get into really the escalation of the book, we're going to go back and do a review. And it's not going to be very extensive. I'm just going to bring out a couple of things from each chapter that I've been doing some other reading and some additional research. And there's just some other things I want to bring out. So we'll start doing that probably next week. Before today, we just want to go back through it. We're not going to do it too exhaustively. But this, and again, for those of us who are members here and come here all the time, this is a topic that we discuss all the time. So I dare say we might be a little bit jaded to this topic, or maybe you can get a little bit, dare I use the word, bored with it. But there may be some people in here who doesn't really understand why Jesus took this method with this fellow. See, you can't you don't handle every lost person the same, or you shouldn't. You should not handle every lost person the same way. Jesus did not handle every lost person the same way. You have to give them what they need, and Jesus did not handle the woman at the well in John 4 the way he handled Nicodemus in John 3. He didn't handle them the same way. It's the same gospel, but based on their attitude and their knowledge of Scripture, he did not handle them the same way. And when I teach John 3 and 4, I try to teach them together because there's a good juxtaposition there. So, the main question here is, and if you'll just go up to look at verse 16, you can read it in Mark 10. Mark 10 is it's also in Luke 18 to some degree, but Mark 10 is a really good passage, and you can compare those if you wish. We're not going to do that today, but in verse 16, and behold, one came and said unto him, Good Master, what good thing shall I do that I may have? Mark 10 uses the term inherit. We went into that last week. That's not a contradiction. The Jews, the Jews to a large degree, they believed they were right with God, Brother Archer. They believed they would make it to heaven, make it to the millennium, which is what they thought about a lot, simply by virtue of the fact that they were a Jew. Simply by virtue of the fact that they could trace their lineage on both their mother and father's side back to Abraham. And there was no mixed blood, there was no Gentile blood, there was no Samaritan blood, if you will. And they believed that is what made them right with God. And so this gentleman here seems to kind of have the same idea as did Nicodemus. And of course, we don't really know what Nicodemus' specific position was on this, but we do know that in John 3, Jesus used the phrase to be born again a lot. It's used 3 or 4 times in that chapter, John 3, and then it's only used again one other time in Scripture that I know of. And the point Jesus was stressing is that your Jewish lineage is not going to fix you here. The fact that you're a child of Abraham is not going to fix you. So first of all, he said, Good Master. Now, we know that Jesus took issue with this. If you stop right, and this is just a brief review, I'm looking at the clock, we're not going to spend a lot of time on this, but Jesus said, if you just stop at Good Master and go down and look at Jesus' reply, he said, Why callest thou me good? There's none good but one, that is God. He said, y'all pray for me this morning, I'm having a difficult time with my throat. But he said, either you're saying that I'm God, he said, either you're saying that I'm God, or you have an overinflated opinion about the goodness of man. You have some misguided ideas about the character and the goodness and the reputation and the moral aspect of man. See, he didn't know Christ intimately. There's no biblical record that he knew Christ on an intimate level. He knew Christ by reputation only. He had heard, and he had no doubt heard about some of the miracles and some of the, quote, feats, unquote, that Christ had performed. So Jesus said, either you're saying that I'm God, or you have an overinflated, misguided opinion about the goodness and the reputation and the moral character of man. And if you read on, if we read on, we know that he did. And by the way, every person, before they can come to Christ, every person is going to have to settle this question. You're going to have to look at what you think about your morality. You're going to have to look at what you think about your character. You're going to have to look at what you think about your shortcomings and the value of your good works, and you're going to have to compare that with the righteousness of a holy God. You're going to have to answer that question. Obviously, Jesus was good. He was God. There are dozens and dozens of verses in the Old and New Testament to point to the fact that Jesus was God in the flesh. There's a whole book written. A whole book is written to prove that Jesus was God in the flesh. It is something that you must know. It is something people say you got to know enough. Well, this is part of what you got to know. This is part of that enough. It's something that you must know in order to go to heaven. You must understand that Jesus is God in the flesh, and He dealt with the sins of the world, and He was the only one worthy because He was God in the flesh. So it's not that this man wasn't accurate when he said good master. It's that he didn't know that. He was throwing that word around kind of loosely. Now, we asked the question last week, why would Jesus point this man to the commandments? We know that one does not keep the commandments to go to heaven. We know that the law was not given to be kept. We know this. The law was never given to be kept in order to go to heaven. Never. But Jesus pointed this man to the law because, Galatians 3:26, the law is our schoolmaster to bring us unto Christ. See, when you come face to face with what the standard is, the standard is not do the best you can. I'm always leery when somebody, and maybe I shouldn't be this way, and I don't mean all the time, but I'm often leery of someone who lackadaisically says, well, I did my best. I've had to tell my 8-year-old before, well, then your best wasn't good enough. Listen, if I told you to sweep the floor and I see a chicken bone over here, how in the world do you miss a chicken bone? I could see missing a few crumbs. Everybody's done that. But how in the world are you going to miss a chicken bone? Listen, these roided up chickens they got today, the bones are that long. It looks like an arm bone. So if he says, well, Daddy, I did the best. Well, your best isn't good enough. Listen, in case you didn't know, I'm not one of these everybody gets a trophy type fellas. Everybody doesn't need a trophy. Even the kid listen, these days, even the kid who sits in the dugout eating his bat and smells funny, he gets a trophy. Listen, so your best isn't good enough. When you come face to face with the standard, see, Jesus was bringing him, Brother Kenny, Jesus was bringing him to the standard. See, like I said, these first two, do no murder, that's easy. You shouldn't have to think about that. Do no murder. Don't commit adultery. Those are pretty basic. Brother Donnell's either killed somebody or he hadn't. I'm going to go with that he hadn't. He hadn't. See, these first two are pretty easy. But when you go through it, as we said last week, this fella should have been brokenhearted. Listen, by the time you get to love your neighbor as yourself, that's pretty rough. That's pretty rough. By the time you get to love your neighbor as yourself, Brother Archer, he should have been down on his knees. And he should have said, Jesus, I'm not who I thought I was. I thought that I was doing pretty good, Brother Carlisle. Listen, I thought I was all right. Because compared to other people, I'm doing fine. Compared to other individuals, listen, you can always find somebody, no matter how sorry you may be, you can always find somebody sorrier than you if you look hard enough. So compared to other people, he said, I'm fine. But when you compare your efforts and your activities and your religious resume, if you will, to the blemishless holiness and eternal righteousness of God, you have no chance. And this fella should have been, Jesus, you just told me this is what I have to do. You told me that this is what I have to do, but I can't do it. Listen, do you have any other? Is there an alternative path? Is there another way? But this fella didn't do that. This fella said, Jesus, I've already done all this. Look at the next verse. Look at verse 20. The young man saith unto him, all these things have I kept from my youth up. He said, Jesus, I've already done this. Was that true? No, we hadn't already done them. So you can add another one to what we see here. You can add a line. You can add arrogance. He said, Jesus, I've already done this. Listen, why don't you give me something hard to do? Give me something hard to do. So Jesus said, okay, I got to get him down to where he lives. I got to show him that he's not good enough. That's why Jesus brought this man to the law. See, the law was given that every mouth may be stopped and all the world may become guilty before God. Well, I do the best I can. Your best isn't good enough. Your best isn't good enough. And finally, when a person submits to the, see, you have to submit to the ministry of the law. The law was our schoolmaster to bring us unto Christ. God said using Paul in Galatians 3:12, God said that if you're going to do the law, you got to live in it. In other words, you got to do it all. You can't just pick and choose which ones you're going to do. You got to do it all. James 2:10 said if you offend the law in one point, you're just as guilty as if you've broken all of it. There's things you can't be a little bit of. You can't be a little bit pregnant. You're either pregnant or you're not. You can't be a little bit perfect. You can't be a little bit imperfect. You're either totally perfect or you're imperfect. I wish I could say that you can't be just a little bit smart. But unfortunately, that's not true. If you look around you, a lot of people just a little bit smart. But you can't be a little bit dead. You're either, and I know somebody's going to give me a scenario about some fellow in a coma with no brain, all that stuff. But you can't be a little bit dead. You're either dead or you're alive. Oh, okay, Brother Donnell. Give the mic to Brother Donnell.
The victim of the thieves that the Good Samaritan helped out was half dead, according to the Bible.
Okay, I'll take that one off the list, Brother Donnell. Listen, my daddy used to say, I'm going to half kill. You ever been half killed? You ever been half killed? It is unpleasant. As near as I can understand it, what that means is that for a long portion of time, a certain portion of your body is going to be in pain. I don't mean now just for a few minutes. I mean for a couple days. And when you sit all the time, it's even less fun. All right, now I'm gonna go ahead and take you, brother. I'm gonna go ahead and see what you got to say. But let's not, okay, I'll take dead off the list. Brother Matt Herrera. Give the mic to Brother Matt Herrera. Let's not get too far off track now. He's one of my students, so I know him a little bit.
With leprosy, when your nose is completely atrophied and falls off your face, can you say that's dead?
Well, the nose is, yeah. I mean, the fellow's not, but the nose is. I knew he was going to say something. Thank you, brother. Thank you. All right, so we'll no longer say you can't be a little bit dead. You can be spiritually, yes, sir. We know that. But my point is, back to my point. This is one of the dangers of open discussion. Back to my point is you can't be a little bit perfect. You're either completely perfect or you're imperfect. To offend in one point is to be guilty of all. And this is why God brought this man to the law. This is not some special case for the Jews. I've had people say that. Well, this is the social aspect that was specifically for the Jews. No, that's not true. That's not true. Jesus brought this man to the law because you know who's at the end of the law. Christ is the end of the law for righteousness to everyone that believeth. So once you go to the process of the law, through the process of the law, once you submit to the process of the law and allow the law to bring you to the end of yourself, you know what you've done that nobody knows about. You know the thoughts you have that you'll never tell anybody about. You know the things that you think back on and you cringe when you think back on it. You know the times where you completely and utterly blew it. You know it. And Jesus was trying to bring this individual to the end of his own self, to the end of his own efforts. But this fellow here wasn't listening. Jesus gave him things to do, and by the time you get to the end, there's no way you could do it all the time. Listen, if Brother Rowan was my next door neighbor, we'd have no problems. I mean, we'd have no problems. But there's some people, I don't want to be my next door neighbor. I just would prefer I wasn't in that situation. It's impossible to love your neighbor as yourself. It's impossible. Can't do it. To love your neighbor with the same protective, obsessive nature that you love yourself. Can't do it. You can't do it. And Jesus was trying to bring this individual and show this individual that there was no good thing he could do to have eternal life. There was no good thing. But instead of submitting to it, you know what he did? He told a lie. And I believe he knew he was telling a lie. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he was totally deceived. I don't know. But he said, hey, I've already, and he even added, I've done it from my youth up. I mean, from the time I was a boy. Of course, he probably meant around the age of 13. That's a big deal for the Jewish culture, was the age of 13. Okay, Brother Donnell had his hand up again. Bring the mic to Brother Donnell.
Don't you suppose we may possibly be looking at the effect that pride has on blinding people?
Sure.
So in his pride, anyway.
So we can add lying and we can add pride. See, years ago, you know, like I've said before, we got a Nintendo 10 years after everybody else had one. And when you're in fundamentalism, it's not wicked if you wait a decade. If you wait a decade to do it, it's not wicked. You just got to let it wear off. You know, can people throw their TVs in the river, then a few months later they go and buy another one. And they probably going to buy a bigger one and a nicer one than what they had. And please don't get upset. I grew up in fundamentalism, radical fundamentalism. I'm not a big fan of it. But if you wait a decade and see if it was all still right, everybody'd still be doing it. If TV was wicked, everybody'd still not have one. So anyway, we got a Nintendo 10 years after everybody else had a Sega Genesis and moved on to something else. And listen, there was this game called Super Mario Brothers. And I thought I was pretty good. I'd get 150,000 points, you know, something like that, 80,000, somewhere in there. And my little 6-7-year-old brother, I mean, he come in there and he got something like 1.5 million points. And every 100,000 points, you got a new man. Every 100,000 points. And on his side, the whole bottom of the screen was just lined up with men. And the game would last for days because Daddy would make us go and do other stuff, you know, but you wouldn't turn the game off. You just said it, you had to be real careful because those things would blink out if you looked at them wrong. So yeah, and listen, my point is, I thought I was pretty good, Brother Archer, till I met him, till he played me. See, we think we're pretty good until the law gets up to us. A man's got a little cough, then he goes to the doctor and realizes he's got double pneumonia. The law was given that every mouth, we're talking about, see, the law is lawful when it's used lawfully. 1 Timothy 1:8, I believe. The law is lawful when a man uses it lawfully, which implies there's an unlawful way to use the law. You know what the unlawful way is? Tell people they got to keep it to go to heaven. Tell people they got to be baptized to go to heaven. Tell people they got to speak in tongues to go to heaven. Tell people they got to get a second unction of the Spirit. We all have the same unction of the Spirit, by the way. If you're saved, we got the same. We may not be letting the Spirit be used like somebody else. It may not have freedom like somebody else, but we all got the same unction of the Spirit. I'm not going to get into that. But an unlawful use of the law is when you tell people what you got to do to get to heaven. To use the law lawfully is to use the law as to show an individual, here's a standard that you can't meet. And then when a person quits throwing up all the excuses and they say, well, based on what you're telling me, I don't have any hope. I'm helpless and hopeless. That's when Jesus says, wait a minute. Wait a minute. I've already fulfilled the law. I've already met the standard of the law. The law demanded perfection, and I was perfect in every way that you failed. I succeeded in every way that you didn't succeed. I met the standard of the law, and I died for you on your behalf in your place. Now take me and go to heaven. You have no righteousness of your own, so take mine by faith and go to heaven. And the righteousness of God, who is Christ, is imputed to your account at the moment when you realize that as insufficient as you are, Christ has already done it and He is sufficient, and you take Him by faith, and you are sealed until the day of redemption. And that is why Christ brought this man to the law. That's why. There's some, in every Romans class, my students have to list with Scripture the biblical, what is the biblical ministry of the law, and they got to list Scripture. Romans 7. The law was given to make sin exceedingly sinful. Listen, you're going down a back road and you may not know what the standard is for speed. And by the way, the state trooper probably won't take ignorance as an excuse. But once you see the sign, then you hit right in the face with the standard. The law was given to make sin exceeding sinful. The law was our schoolmaster to bring us unto Christ, Galatians 3:26. The law was given, Revelation 3:19 and 20. The law was given that every mouth may be stopped and all the world may become guilty before God. That's why He brought him to the law. And then we moving on now as we get ready to close here. Then we get, of course, Jesus said, okay, if you've done all that, which was a lie, if you've done all that, sell everything you have and give it to the poor. And if this man had the right attitude, after seeing that he really hadn't fulfilled all those commandments, and after realizing how much trouble he's in, and after saying, Jesus, I've never loved my neighbor as myself. I didn't honor my father and mother the way I should have. Jesus, is there anything else you can do for me? Jesus said, come on over here, let's talk about it. But he didn't do that. He said, I've already done all this stuff. I thought you knew everything, Jesus. I thought you were supposed to be somebody. Why don't you give me something more difficult? He said, okay, I got something for you. Sell everything you had and give it to the poor. And he went away sorrowful because he had great possessions. Then we go into the next part. Now, by the way, this is not a statement against riches. Listen, and again, I'm going to try not to get on a soapbox. It's really difficult. Frugality does not equal spirituality. Frugality does not equal spirituality. Doing without, people say, well, I'm just going to do without. Well, if I can buy it, I'm just going to go buy it. I mean, if the money's there and I want it, and if I feel like my family needs it, I'm just going to go get it. I mean, I can go out in the yard and eat grass. Yeah. Well, here I go. I'm veering. Frugality does not equal spirituality. This is not a state. This young man should have been willing to sell all he had. He should have said, Jesus, if this is what it takes to know you, then I'll do it. If this is what it takes to know you, then I'll do it. But he didn't do that. And so Jesus here makes a statement. Then Jesus said, verse 23, then Jesus said unto his disciples, verily I say unto you that a rich man shall hardly enter into the kingdom of heaven. And again I say unto you, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of heaven. This is a Jewish idiom representing great difficulty. We don't need to get into what the specifics mean. It's just it's a Jewish phrase that represents great difficulty. It'd be easier for this to happen than for a rich man to go to heaven. This is not a statement against riches. Most people who are wealthy, most rich people tend to rest in their wealth. They tend to lean on their wealth as opposed to Christ. Now, Abraham was one of the richest people of his day. He told the king of Sodom, he said, I'm not taking a penny from you. So you can't tell people that you made me rich. David was very wealthy. Solomon was very wealthy. The Bible talks about saving and planning and leaving an inheritance for your children's children. And people say, well, that's the gospel. That's not what that's talking about in the context. The gospel is a great heritage to leave to your children. It is the most important heritage to leave to your children. I'm not disputing that. But that is not what that's talking about in the context of that chapter in Proverbs. It's talking about leaving your children something to get started in life. It was a very important part of the Jewish culture. So the Bible's not against wealth. The Bible's not against planning. The Bible's not against saving. The Bible's not against doing that sort of thing, as long as you remember to be a liberal soul. The liberal soul shall be made fat. There is that scattereth, yet increaseth. The Bible says that if you honor the Lord with your income and the first fruits of your increase, that your barns will be filled with plenty. That's not barely getting by. Well, I eat bologna 3 times a day because I'm suffering for Jesus. That's not what that's the Bible doesn't teach that. Jesus' point here is a lot of people do what this man did. A lot of people let their wealth interfere with knowing Christ. If this man had the right attitude toward the gospel, he would have said, if you need me to sell everything I've got, I'll do it. That's how little it matters to me compared to my relationship with you. How much does what we have materialistically? How much does what we have matter to us if it's going to interfere with our relationship with Him? We'll all be willing to get rid of it. If He wants us to, we ought to be willing to live in a grass hut. A lot of people have done it, by the way. Listen, Ronnie Doss could have been a millionaire. He could have been a millionaire. And as far as I know, he's been eating beans and cornbread and potatoes every day for the last 35, 40 years. That's what he likes to eat, so good for him. That's what he likes to eat. He enjoys it. A lot of people have left materialism behind to go and serve the Lord to a greater extent. But this is not a statement against materialism. As long as whatever the Lord blesses us with, we use it for Him. And we don't let it interfere with our relationship. And now look at what Peter says. See, you got both extremes here. Look at what Peter says. Jesus, in verse 25, when His disciples heard it, they were exceedingly amazed and said, Who then can be saved? Jesus beheld them and said unto them, with men this is impossible, but with God all things are possible. Then answered Peter, look at what Peter said in verse 27. Then answered Peter and said unto him, Behold, we have forsaken all and followed thee. What shall we have thereof? He said, we're not like that fellow. Listen, I got rid of my big screen TV. I got rid of my brand new car. I forsook it all. I'm eating beanie weenies. What I get, Jesus? These beanie weenies getting kind of old. Now, he obviously, I'm paraphrasing a little. He don't say anything about beanie weenies. But his attitude, that was his attitude. Hey, we're not like that fella. Boy, I sure am glad I missed that trap. Aren't you proud of me, Jesus? Aren't you proud that I missed a trap that this fellow fell into? And look what Jesus said. Jesus does not reprimand him. He doesn't reprimand him. Jesus doesn't jump on him. Verse 28, Jesus said unto them. By the way, the verse says, He said unto them. So it could very well be that He knew they were all thinking the same thing. And Peter was the only one with too little gumption to just open his mouth and say it. But the verse says He said unto them. Verily I say unto you, that ye which have followed me, in the regeneration, when the Son of Man shall sit in his throne, set in the throne of his glory, ye also shall sit upon 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. And every one that hath forsaken houses, or brethren, or sisters, or fathers, or mother, or wife, or children, or lands, for my name's sake, shall receive 100-fold, and shall inherit everlasting life. So he didn't reprimand him here. He said, Peter, this is what you got coming. Listen, it's not coming yet. You're going to go through some things. You're going to have some failures. You're going to you're going to be graduating here in a few weeks. And what you do in the book of Acts, I mean, what Peter did in the book of Acts and the key disciples, he said, this is what you got coming. By the way, this is a literal kingdom. Matthew's your kingdom gospel. We hadn't talked about that a lot. This is the literal kingdom. The time of humanity is going to end with Christ sitting eternally on the throne, taking his place as the Son of David. But notice what he said here. He said, Peter, you're going to get your reward. But be careful. Look at verse 30. Many that are first shall be last, and the last shall be first. There's a lot of people who have managed to make it through their Christian life, and they're always in the upper echelon. They're always the one getting asked to speak. They're always the one that's, heading up. And listen, there's people that have public ministry. That's our job. But there may be somebody in the back who doesn't get a whole lot of credit, who doesn't get a whole lot of the warmth of the spotlight, and they'll be the one first in line to get rewards in heaven. Nothing wrong with having a public ministry. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying a lot of times we kind of train our eyes on those who have had a public ministry. When there might be the little old lady in the church that's cleaned the church faithfully for umpteen years, and she doesn't complain about it, and she doesn't do it so people know about it, and her name never shows up in the bulletin. She might be the one getting more rewards in heaven than somebody who had a public ministry. So Jesus says, Peter, you're going to get it. But be careful. And by the way, I can't take verse 29 and say, well, I got to forsake my wife and children so I can serve the Lord better. That's not what this is saying. That's called being a gooberhead, by the way. That's not what this is saying. But from the perspective of the world thinks, well, he's got a chance to move over here and take this job making a pile of money, but yet he's staying in this little town so he can give all his time to the church. From the world's perspective, it looks as though you're not taking care of your family. From the world's perspective, it's very similar to the verse, hate your father and mother if you want to serve me. Doesn't mean I'm going to hate my family. It means from the world's perspective, things are going to look kind of off. So that is Matthew chapter 19. Very briefly, we have a couple of minutes. Are there any questions or comments as we close down here on Matthew 19? Very briefly. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. All right, Brother Gret, y'all got to get with it now. Don't wait till I'm counting down. Just raise your hand.
I just wanted to make a comment on we have actually met preachers in public ministry and pastors that believe that your public ministry comes before your wife or your family or anything like that because of those verses, but they take them out of context. I'm saying that a lot of things that we take for granted that people think, well, nobody could believe that, and they do.
Yeah. I will say again, and there won't be any time for any more comments because I'm going to say this and we're going to be done. I will say again, my first responsibility is not to Faith Baptist Church. It's not to David Rowan. It's not to Rob Donnell. It's not to Faith Bible College. My first responsibility, if I'm going to serve the Lord in the right way, my first responsibility is to my wife. My first responsibility is to my family. You don't forsake your family to serve the Lord. You serve the Lord in the local church with your family. You make your family a part of the local church. And you say, well, I can't get my family to well, then you're in a mess. You married the wrong one, and now I'm not sure what to tell you. Now I'm not sure what to tell you. But except asking the Lord for grace, and maybe the Lord will do a work in somebody's heart. But my first responsibility is to that beautiful lady sitting back there in that pink shirt next to my best friend. That's my first responsibility. So, before I get off on another soapbox, we're going to shut it down. I'm going to ask Brother Kenny Adderby, if you would, sir, to stand and close us in prayer.